Welcome everyone. My name is Ignacio Fernandez. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor at the Climate Registry, and as such I wanted to welcome you to this panel. I'll let CLG to do the presentations. I just wanted to welcome you, letting you know that this pavilion is open for initiatives on decarbonization, especially on electrification, which holds a very strong side in our heart. So thank you, CLG, for organizing this event. Thank you for the panelists for your flexibility and contribution, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Ignacio, for hosting us today and for accommodating this event that for us is very important. It's about accelerating electrification for the low carbon transition. And I just want to give you a few words with respect to Chile. I mean, Chile, you may know, is a very long country. We have a lot of solar energy in the north and a lot of wind in the south, but the demand is in the middle of the country. So we have a lot of problems, you know, moving the energy, transmitting the energy from the north to the center part of the country. So we want to electrify more our country, but so far we've been super successful in increasing the renewable energy into the electricity part of it, yeah? But the challenge now is to, and we are above 70% in fact of renewable, but the challenge for Chile now is to electrify more the matrix, the energy matrix. So we want to move the 22% into a larger number, 30%, 35%, and even further, okay? So that's our main challenge. So what are the barriers that we have so far? Well, the barriers are the transmission system itself, okay, because it's not able to accommodate all the energy that we are producing in the north, and therefore we have a lot of curtailment, for instance, at the moment in Chile. But also we have regulatory problems in terms of the allocation of the permits and the issuing of permits. They are not agile enough, and that's making us struggling, you know, to build new power station, to be able, you know, to install a project into a community, and we may not have a straightforward acceptance from the communities. We lack also the involvement of the regulator, okay? So far the regulator is kind of leaving the process to happen in between the private sector and the communities and not getting involved, while through our NDCs, we are very committed that the decarbonization has to happen through private investment. Therefore, the government should be pushing, you know, and allowing those strategic projects to take place in the country, and therefore help them to take place. So we have a challenge at the moment in Chile, which is to get the businesses involved in the decarbonization process in order, you know, to decarbonize even further. But as I say, not only the electricity market that we have right now, which, by the way, is not growing, okay? We have an issue in Chile at the moment, for instance, where the demand for electricity is not growing. So even if we put more energy into the system, there is no demand. So what we need is to increase the demand from the industry, from the transport sector, etc. Okay? So because of all this, we've been participating in a campaign which is called More Renewable. This is a campaign that's a Chilean and Latin American chapter that is part of an international chapter which comes from our CLG UK partner, that we are part of an alliance which is the Ibero-American Business Network for Green Growth, and we are all pushing more renewables, and we are both supporting the triple renewable energies to the year 2030. But as I said, the international chapter, the UK chapter, is doing like the international campaign. We are doing the Latin American. And as you are going to see, because my colleague from CLG will tell you about, Latin America is quite different to the rest of the world. I mean, while the rest of the world, they need to do a huge effort in terms of increasing renewables, okay, because electricity is not very much into renewable, Latin America it is very much. In fact, Brazil and Chile, as I said before, are above the 70%. So for us, the challenges are different. That's what we are going to be talking about. So that's what I'm very pleased, you know, with the panelist speakers that are going to be with us tonight. Because, well, this afternoon, not yet tonight, but it seems like tonight. And we are very happy that we will be able to talk, with the region, within the region, which are the challenges and the opportunities, because for Chile, for Brazil, for Latin America, this means a lot of opportunities. We need to electrify more, particularly the industry, the transport sector, but in the end, what we want is economic growth, okay, a just transition that will help us to decarbonize our economies. So having said that, I will give the microphone to my colleague, Matías Cáceres, which is the policy advisor who will explain to you the campaign and the policy asks that we've been working on through the year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this conversation. So, as María Teresa said, I'm Matías Cáceres. I'm a policy advisor at CLG Chile, and I'm going to present today our policy ask to accelerate the energy transition in Latin America. So what we did is to amplify the campaign More Renewables in Latin America. We did a huge work where we collaborated with the academia, the civil society, governments, and of course the businesses, and we made 6 policy action points, which I'm going to present now. So our first policy ask is to have a demand electrification policy. So while over 77% of Chile's electricity comes from renewables, only 22% in the energy mix is actually renewable. Why? Because we depend on fossil fuels in a lot of sectors, like transportation, mining, and other industrial sectors. So what we want is to promote sector roadmaps to replace fossil fuel consumption with renewable electricity. And because we know there are a lot of economic incentives behind this, we need to lower the electricity prices for the end users, making them, of course, more competitive. In a lot of Thank you. In a lot of places, like in the south of Chile, we depend on firewood, and of course we use fossil fuels a lot. So lowering the electricity prices, it will have a huge impact in this electrification process. Next slide, please. So of course, we don't only need a clean grid. We need a more resilient grid, a more reliant grid. So we must ensure a reliable and resilient electricity system in the face of variability or extreme events like the ones that are caused by climate change. We have to have a grid that is strength with large-scale storage and, of course, with smart networks and greater flexibility and certainty. We need this. And because of this, this brings us to our third ask, which is a national strategy for storage and smart grids. We need, and we talk with a lot of actors, as I said, the civil society, businesses, the governments from Latin America, and business, and they said to declare storage as a critical and a priority infrastructure. Because of this, if we can make this, we can modernize the networks towards smart systems and integrate the demand and reduce the curtailment. Actually, in the past few days, we saw in the news that there's a new transmission line that it's being approved right now, which is Quimallo Aguirre in Chile. It's a huge transmission line, but it's going to be full operable in 2029. That's a lot of years, and we need dozens of projects like right now. And that brings us to our fourth policy ask, which is regulatory modernization and permitting with socio-environmental criteria. Permits right now are too slow, are not sharp enough. Our institutions must be faster, must be sharper. So streamline permits with early participation and with strategical territory planning, it's a huge thing that we need to do. Actually, in Chile, we have a term, it's called permisología. It's such a big problem, the permits, that we have to make a word for it. And we had elections yesterday, and it was such a big problem. So it's very important in Latin America, and in Chile, of course, a really big problem. So we have to strengthen the state capacity to regulate at the pace of innovation. Please, next slide. Of course, our next point, it's about people, it's about justice, the benefits from this transition must reach the communities. So we are asking for a just and binding territorial transition. For this, we need to fund this transition, this just transition strategy, focusing on labor reconversion and environmental remediation. Of course, for this, we need citizen participation with the communities and promote distributed and local generation. Actually, what happened is like 3 or 4 days ago in Chile, there was a new approval of a permit from a big project from Statkraft, which was like years in a conflict with indigenous communities from the south of Chile in the Región de los Ríos. In the Los Ríos region, there's a lot of Mapuches and Mapuches Huilliches indigenous communities, and there was like years in conflict, and a few days ago it was approved. But we cannot have too slow processes. We need to work more on this point. And for the end, I think this policy ask, it's important because we're here at COP30. We need Latin American cooperation and integration. Here at COP30, this is a regional event. We can make a regional energy integration agreement. We have to optimize resources, strengthen energy security, and of course access climate finance. We can't do this alone. A nation can't do this alone. We need to work together. Latin America, the whole world needs to work together, because this is not just a climate thing, it's a social problem, it's an economic problem. We need to work together. And now I give the microphone to my executive director. And of course, I invite you to scan the QR codes from a report from the More Renewables campaign. You can see the longer document when we explain all the meetings, all the round tables, all the panels that we did with the civil society, governments, businesses, academia. And if you don't have a lot of times, we did a pocket version so you can actually see in 2 minutes what our policy asks again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Can you hold that? Thank you very much, Matthias, for explaining us and putting on the table the policy asks that are going to be the base for our next conversation, for our panel. So I'm very pleased and happy to introduce each of the panelists. We have today Gregory Briner, which is the Senior Manager of the Policy Team of Women Business Coalition. If you can join us, please. We have Alexa Voytek, Deputy Director, Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation Office of Energy Programs. Thanks a lot. Sarah Swing, Deputy Cabinet Secretary and Senior Advisor on Climate to Governor Newsom, California. And Ricardo Pineda Guzman, Executive Director of Sustenta Honduras. Thank you very much. I may sit, but I prefer to sit this way, so if you don't mind, give me a sec. I will sit this way, yeah. So first, thank you very much, and I would like to say that this project was in collaboration with MSET, and that Ricardo is part of that alliance, MSET, which is the Multinational Electricity Transition Program. I will explain you, and he will be able to explain you more about it. But in the end, what we are all pushing is to make the system more electrified, and we have here very important people, you know, in different angles and countries that will be able to share your experience with us. So let me start with Alexa. From your vantage point at the Tennessee State Energy Office, what are the biggest opportunities and challenges in electrifying buildings and transportation, especially in a region served by a vertically integrated utility like Tennessee Valley Authority?
Sure, yeah. Can you hear me?
Absolutely fine. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Tennessee is a unique state in that we are the only U.S. state that is blanketed both by public power, covering our whole state, as well as a single generation and transmission utility. So that single generation and transmission utility is the Tennessee Valley Authority, or TVA. TVA was created back in the 1930s under the New Deal, and they are a federal corporation. And so because of that, they're not regulated by a normal public utility commission like you would have in most other states. They're regulated by their board, which is appointed by the US president. And so we at the state level, we don't have any say into what TVA's fuel generation mix should be or what their investment in energy efficiency should be because we're not regulating them. For that reason, we have a more collaborative relationship with the Tennessee Valley Authority. I will say that as of today, our power in Tennessee is nearly 60% carbon free. And that is because of the work that TVA has done to deploy primarily large hydropower dams as well as nuclear. I think we're one of 5 US states that more than 40% of our electricity is powered by nuclear. And TVA is aggressively pursuing new nuclear to further decarbonize their generation portfolio. So our electricity mix is already, about 60% carbon free. If we look at electrification, if I touch briefly on buildings and then transportation, so in the state of Tennessee, a lot of our buildings are actually already electrified. I would say over 60% of our residential buildings are electric, as well as about a little over 50% of our commercial buildings. And the reason for that is partly because of our milder climate, as well as the low cost of electricity in the Tennessee Valley. We have some of the most affordable electricity rates in the U.S. Our electricity is cheaper than 70% of the U.S., and that's partly because TVA is a public power entity, and so they're not trying to make a profit. They're mandated to drive electricity prices down for their customers. So for that reason, there's an economic incentive to heat your home with electricity or to cool your home with electricity or to cook with electricity and so forth. Where we see a bigger opportunity is the transportation sector to electrify, and so a lot of the work that my office does is focused on education and outreach, technical assistance, and providing funding and financing opportunities to help electrify. And in particular, we try and look at areas that are harder to electrify, such as medium and heavy-duty vehicles and some of those non-road vehicles. So we've done a number of initiatives. We've partnered with the Tennessee Valley Authority. One of the things we worked on was to build a fast charging infrastructure network on all of our interstates and U.S. highways, co-funded by us and TVA. And so we did that a few years ago, trying to help build that minimum viable backbone of charging infrastructure so that people can not have range anxiety and be incentivized to adopt an EV. So I'll pause there and maybe pass it to some of the other panelists.
Thank you very much. And well, it's impressive, the penetration that you have over there. And well, perhaps we can teach you something about transportation. I mean, Chile has the metropolitan city, Santiago, is the city outside China that has the strongest penetration in terms of electrification, electric vehicles, public transport. So that's something that we can show around, and we are very proud about it. Greg, I would like to ask you about the strategic role of business coalition. And from your vantage point at Women Business Coalition, how can Global Business Coalition most effectively support countries like Chile in aligning their electrification pathway with long-term decarbonization targets, particularly in contexts where fossil fuel dependent and still very high? If you can tell us about it, please. Thanks.
Thanks, Maria, and thanks very much for having me today. So just to give you some background about Women Business Coalition, who, for those of you who may not be so familiar with the organization. It's a coalition that was set up 10 years ago now. It's our 10th birthday this year in the run-up to the Paris Agreement to bring a coordinated voice of responsible business into the negotiations. So in the run-up to Paris, we wanted to speak all of the leading business groups with a unified voice. And so we had 7 founding business group partners, of which the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership and the corporate leaders groups as part of that are part of this ecosystem. So we're a coalition of business groups, if you like, just to explain how we fit into this. We have had a series of campaigns and various initiatives to bring a business voice on different topics into the negotiations. 2 years ago, we launched a campaign called the Fossil to Clean campaign. So this was bringing the voice of businesses that are moving from fossil fuels to clean energy together. And we had over 240 or so businesses that signed up and committed to moving from fossil to clean and to going in that direction. Now, the next phase of this Fossil to Clean campaign was launched last Tuesday at the conference. I wasn't here in person, but my colleagues were here to launch our electrification campaign. And so now the We Mean Business Coalition, over the next 5 years, will be making a large coordinated push from business on electrification. There'll be a few different strands of that. We are also interested in medium to heavy transport, as Alexa mentioned. Also interested in buildings, and we're interested in industry and those industrial processes where you can move from fossil fuels for industrial heat and that type of thing to electricity where that's possible. And so we're convinced the electric era is here. We want to be part of it. The businesses we're working with, and a lot of them already understand the benefits of moving from fossil fuels to clean energy, and it makes sense increasingly for their bottom line in addition to doing the right thing for the climate. Also, there's a huge efficiency gain to be made here. At the moment, using fossil fuels in many of the ways that we currently use them, if you look at the energy you put in to the energy you get out, is actually a very inefficient way of going about using your energy. And when you switch from fossil fuels to electricity in transport, in buildings, you actually end up using a lot less energy overall. And so that's another great reason to use it. It was mentioned earlier the energy security benefits of doing so. At the moment, if you're a fossil fuel importing country, there's a huge bill every year we are spending on fossil fuels, and the more you can reduce that bill and be dependent on other countries, the better. So to the extent you can use domestic fossil fuel resources to do that, that's great. And maybe also just to flag the health benefits. In many cases, when you're burning fossil fuels, it's not good for us in many ways from a health perspective. And so there's a great efficiency to be made there, and reducing health costs and all the rest of it. So as a coalition, we're strongly supportive of the agenda, and we're trying to bring this in over the next few years. And we will be working with various partners where we can to amplify and make this big push. So at the moment, it's just been launched next week. We're still building up exactly what that will look like over the next 5 years, but we're keen to keep you posted. And yeah, certainly in a very important area for us. And we'll be trying to bring that business voice, calling for stronger policies internationally at places like COP and the international process, as well as domestically where we can work with partners to do so, and to bring businesses on board to put pressure on governments to move faster in this direction.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for highlighting that campaign, because that's the challenge that we have in the region. And well, it's happening not only in the region but abroad as well. I mean, in other regions. And in fact, in Chile, from the Chilean perspective, for instance, we have been pushing, we have a regulation, you know, for green hydrogen, another for lithium, but we don't have a policy for electrification. So one of the things, as Matthias was mentioning, that we have our general elections yesterday. We still don't have a new president, but it's underway. And one of the things we want to ask them is to push for an electrification policy, because we fully understand that that's the next step, no? To move the industry, to move the transport, to transform the different economic sectors into being more electrified. So thank you very much for that. Sarah, I will move to you now. And from your experience, what regulatory conditions are key for electrification to advance as a real tool for the energy transition without creating uncertainty for the actor who must invest or adapt?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for allowing us to participate in the panel. California was really proud to sign an MOU last week with Chile on reducing methane emissions, which is a really exciting collaboration to actually lead to some real climate action within the decade. So we're proud of our partnership with Chile. I think the California story is that investors want certainty. They want clear, consistent rules of the road, and that the biggest barrier to investment is policy whiplash. And that's why Governor Newsom was in Belém this last week. He was in Sao Paulo speaking at an investor symposium to really tell the story that California continues to be a stable, reliable partner on climate. Regardless of what's happening in Washington, D.C., regardless of the headlines, we're still open for business. And we've proven that you can invest in electrification, in clean energy, and also grow your economy California's grown to be the 4th largest economy in the world, so we're really, really proud of that story. So some of the targets that California has set: carbon neutrality by 2045, 100% of retail electricity sales from clean energy by 2045, 6 million heat pumps in buildings by 2030. All of and our clean vehicle targets as well really tell automakers and industry investors where we're headed and how we're going to get there. And finally, this last year, we extended our signature, the artist formerly known as Cap and Trade, now Cap and Invest program, which puts a price on pollution and reinvests back. We extended that program through to 2045, which really sends a market signal that California will be in this business in a stable, predictable place for investment. And happy to talk in a little bit about how we turn those into implementation. But from our vantage point, I think the biggest thing that we have in our arsenal is just this stability and predictable place for investment.
Thank you very much, and thanks for mentioning the signing of the methane agreement, because that was amazing, and signing that commitment, with Chile was something very important. We from Chile are very committed. Our NDC has very strong, points with respect to methane. And well, the Global Methane Hub is, there are very important Chileans in there, particularly in the board, Marcelo Mena being the president, the CEO of the hub. So we are very, very happy that it's happening and these alliances are moving. So thanks a lot. Ricardo, thank you very much for being here with us. And I would like you to ask you the following. Based on your experience designing Honduras decarbonization strategy, now we pass to Latin America, back to Latin America. What lessons can be learned from the country's effort to electrify its energy matrix using renewable sources?
Thank you for the invitation, and of course I really want to emphasize the thank the MSET network, which has allowed us to participate and to build capacities as energy modelers in Honduras. So I will speak more about the MSET network and the upcoming RESET initiative, but right now, just to contextualize, I really like the example of Tennessee, because Honduras actually pretty much shares the same size. However, when it comes to energy demand, we are almost 15 times smaller, and we still have some tremendous challenges by having one of the most expensive electricity prices in the region, even more expensive than what it's being paid in New York City at the moment. So a lot of challenges in the affordability aspect, and a lot of challenges in the aspect of coverage as well. So one of the things that we've learned through these independent decarbonization plans that we've created in a way to propose to the government is that many of the scenarios that we are seeing are very much cost effective and would make sense economically for a country like Honduras, despite us not being perhaps the country with the highest emissions at the moment. So current renewable deployment is around 64%, and cost effective pathways reveal that the equilibrium for cost benefit of deployment of renewable energies is very high, above 90%, which shows how there is a lot of renewable energy potential in Honduras. Another important aspect is that there are still some critical policy gaps between the climate world and the energy commitments. So for instance, even though there have been some advances to put some climate targets, we still see that the energy sector has been moving perhaps in a different direction. So more cohesion and articulation is necessary between our governments, and this is something that we've seen in other Latin American countries and other countries in the region as well. And another aspect that we see is that the transition to a lower cost energy grid can be done quite quickly, especially we are seeing some periods of 5 years of strong investments on increased connectivity with the grids, alongside with increased deployment of technologies like solar and wind. So we see that some early wins are possible. We see that the case of Honduras is a good example for other developing countries, because despite us having or coming from a difficult place, we can see a very much technologically feasible decarbonization by 2050. And most importantly, it also seems to align very well with the territorial aspects of protecting and ensuring that there will be no more generation in protected areas or in the areas that are currently on their indigenous lives. So hope to speak more about that in the panel.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. And well, Chile is completely different to to Honduras, but we've been facing, you know, problems with local communities that they don't understand, like the national benefits of having, you know, more generation, more storage at the territory level, because obviously each community value their own benefits, their individual benefit. That's what I mentioned at the welcoming words, that is very important that the regulator get involved and try to explain and try to make that the benefits really permeate to the local communities. Because if the local communities don't see the benefits for themselves, they think that why are they going to do something even for the country? I mean, not to talk about the world, but even for the country, why should they do it, okay, if they don't receive a personal and individual benefit? So that's something that we need to keep on working in Chile, in Honduras, etc. I'm sure in other countries as well is happening, and so far not solved. So we need to do that. Well, I'm back to you, Alexa, and I would like to ask, how is Tennessee approaching affordability and grid planning to accommodate future electric load growth?
Sure. So I mentioned that the TVA's electricity rates are more affordable than 70% of the U.S. So we already have some of the cheapest electricity in the U.S. Average residential rates are about 12 cents per kilowatt. However, even though we have some of the most affordable electricity, a lot of our building stock, particularly older building stock, is vastly inefficient. And so we know the energy burden is still a massive problem for a lot of our residents. And so I think we as a state, also TVA, are heavily invested in energy efficiency. I know that TVA just recently announced that they'll be spending $1.5 billion on energy efficiency just in the next few years. And then, you know, my office, we help oversee certain programs, including we will be overseeing a home energy efficiency rebate program that will help focus on low to moderate income homes and trying to prioritize whole home upgrades and energy efficiency upgrades. So I think that's a major area of focus for us. I think we're to one of the comments on smart grids, I think we're working with a lot of local power companies doing analyses to analyze opportunities for microgrid deployment within communities and where that could benefit the grid, both from a resiliency and reliability perspective, but also from an affordability perspective. And so we're working with different communities on modeling kind of opportunities for that. And then one more thing that I'll touch on, in Tennessee, I think in a lot of parts of the US right now, we have very high anticipated load growth, not only because of population growth, historic population growth in Tennessee, industrial electrification, transportation electrification, but also because of data centers. And so one of the things that we're working on in coordination with TVA and Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which is in our backyard, is modeling the energy growth associated with those data centers and trying to understand potential impacts on energy affordability for customers. Trying to understand trade-off scenarios if you were to locate a data center here versus there, and how that might impact water, affordability of energy, and so forth. And so that's an area that's obviously budding, but it's an area of high priority and focus as it progresses.
Fantastic. Well, we are also facing the issue of data centers in Chile, and the issue of electricity is good news in the sense that they will demand more energy. Though one of the points that they've made so far is like it will be like an escalator, no? Like you jump from here there, but then you won't keep on growing, while personal consumption keep on growing through income and more people, of course. So that's something that we see. And the other problem with data center for us is water. Yeah, I mean, we're in the middle of a very long drought that have lasted like for more than a decade. And therefore, the demand of water from the data center is something that we have to handle. Yeah, I mean, either, well, they are working a lot in circularity of water, but also in the use of desalinated water, which could be an option for us. So thanks a lot. Back to you, Greg. I would like to ask you about bridging policy and corporate action. Given your experience, bridging policy, what policy mechanisms have you seen as most effective in accelerating private sector investment in demand-side electrification and enable infrastructure in the global south?
Sure. So with the caveat that clearly the policy changes required will vary specifically by country, depending on what the barriers are. But I guess to draw out some general observations, I would highlight one area would be electricity market reform. And there's a couple of different strands to that, but one aspect would be the issue of high electricity prices has come up multiple times already in this discussion, and clearly in the cost of living crisis, that's really top of mind for many people and for many businesses. In many countries, the cost of electricity is still set every 30 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it is, by the highest cost of the generator on the grid at that point, and in many cases that's still going to be coal or gas. And so right now, if you've still got high dependency on coal and gas in your system, you're going to have higher electricity prices, and you're not necessarily seeing the benefits of using zero fuel cost renewables on your system yet. They're not feeding through. So that's just one example of how right now it's more of a legacy that a lot of the ways that electricity markets were designed for centralized thermal plants, and now we're transitioning, and we haven't necessarily, the rules haven't caught up to the reality of where we are on the energy mix side. Another area I would highlight is there are still various forms of support for fossil fuels out there, including subsidies for fossil fuels, and so that's an area in which WMBC Business Coalition has been quite vocal about recently. We have organised in the run-up to COP30 a statement from business groups calling for realigning incentives when it comes to energy, and to be reconsidering some of those support that's currently going to fossil fuels, and using perhaps some of that support to support renewables and clean energy grids and the things that we've been talking about here. So that's definitely an area which still needs reform in many places. The importance of grids and storage as well has come up several times, and so you mentioned at the beginning, Maria, having solar at the north and wind in the south and demand in the middle. I feel like in many places that's the case. I grew up in England, and all of the wind power is up north and the demand's in the south. And I spent the last 6 years in New Zealand, where you've got all of the demand at the top and all of the hydropower at the bottom. So I feel like this happens a lot. I guess it also links to this idea of having more collaboration between countries, because the more countries you can link together and have links between them, then the wind is blowing somewhere and the sun is shining somewhere. So that helps, but in general, investing in grids and storage is certainly key. And one last area I would highlight, which I've been working on recently at the coalition in particular, are the nationally determined contributions that have been coming through for 2035. At the moment, not many of them, from what I've seen, have specifically highlighted electrification and the need for accelerating electrification and changing from using fossil fuels in these end uses to using electricity. A lot of them have renewable energy targets and electricity targets, which is great. That's one side of the coin. The other side is actually getting away from fossil fuels and using electricity to pair with the renewable electricity you're bringing on the grid. So you need those two parts of it. And at the moment, arguably, there's a lot of focus on building new renewables, which is excellent, but you also be needing, in parallel, to be developing the demand for those, like you say, through data centers, transport, buildings, whatever it might be, but they need to go hand in hand. So I'd highlight those 3.5. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot. And thanks for mentioning the integration. Okay, I mean, that's something that we mentioned in the policy ask, but I think in Latin America, we really need to integrate more all the matrix in between the different countries. And that sometimes for us, for Chile, sounds so far away, because we are so in the south of Chile. We have had integration with Argentina, with gas in the past. So it is something that we can work on in electricity, particularly from the north, and also if we think for the future in terms of green hydrogen, you know, that could be an option as well. So the integration, the technology, the storage, of course, there are different elements that will help us to integrate and to take advantage of the renewable. I mean, in Chile, we don't have fossil fuels, so that's a plus for us, you know, that is pushing us faster into that. but integration have been something that we haven't worked that much. And in the last Latin American energy meeting that happened in Chile, the OLADE meeting, happened in Chile like less than a month ago, I think. I don't know if you were there, Ricardo, no? One of the big things was integration, okay? How to be able to integrate. I mean, we have different sources of renewable energy, you know, across the territory. And if we integrate them, we can improve efficiency use, you know, and therefore lower the cost, increase the availability, and therefore be able to decarbonize further. So that's a huge challenge. Thanks a lot. Sarah, I would like to go for the next question to you. When we move from design to implementation, significant gaps often appear. What would you say are the most critical institutional capacities for electrification to effectively contribute to decarbonization and achieve concrete results?
Great, thank you. You know, I already talked about how our climate laws and our targets provide legal certainty, which has unlocked billions in both public and private investment. But out of our state policies, we embark on what's called our scoping plan, which is basically a whole of government, whole of agency effort to actually put those targets into an implementation plan. And so what that has done is, you know, led by our California Air Resources Board, but in partnership with all of the other agencies that do electricity or transportation or natural and working lands, agriculture, you know, to put forward that implementation plan. And that really kind of brings those gaps to light. And so through those scoping plans, we've really enabled very deep cross-agency partnership, which for electrification is absolutely essential. I'm sure other states, Tennessee is as complicated as we are, but we have our Public Utilities Commission, who does our rates and resource adequacy incentives, our Energy Commission, who does our forecasting and our procurement. We have our grid operator overseeing transmission, and it can get very complicated really quickly. So we tried to de-silo all of our agencies and make electrification really a whole of government policy, of course. And then finally, the governor issued an executive order on permit streamlining to accelerate clean energy build out and electrification build out. So we also added a little bit of getting out of our own way.
Well, it's something that, as Matías was mentioning as well, we were saying that in Chile, permissiología became like a new word, no? But talking in these meetings, you know, at COP and at OLADE before, we realized that it's not our problem, it's the problem of everybody. And in fact, with that, I would like to come back to something that you mentioned before, which is certainty. Because many times we've talked to businesses and they say, you know what? I don't mind time. Okay, if you tell me 5 years, I can handle 5 years. Even if you tell me 10 years, I can handle 10 years. But don't tell me 5 and then it becomes 10. That's the worst that can happen, because then your business accounts, you know, go into bankruptcy or in a shock. Yeah. So certainty with respect to that is very important, and we need to understand. In Chile, as an example as well, we've done a huge effort. In fact, we just passed a law to reduce the time of the sectoral permits. Okay, so it was a huge work to try to reduce the inefficiencies, understanding that we still want to look after the environment, we still want to fulfill with different laws, so time is necessary. But if we can make them more efficient, then we can cope, you know, with them having a specific time, and obviously we can keep on trying to reduce them. But the most important thing is to give certainty to the private sector, otherwise it's complicated. Well, I would like to go back to you, Ricardo, and now ask you more about this multi-country electricity transition, the MSET. So considering the work being carried out by MSET, in fact, project in the region, what opportunities do you see to strengthen Latin American cooperation in addressing common energy transition challenges, such as long-duration energy storage, grid integration, and access to climate?
Yeah. That's a big question. Climate finance. So, of course, let me start by contextualizing a little bit for the room who is the MSET network and what is this upcoming reset initiative. So, the MSET network has been working already for a few years on bringing together, I want to say it's 10 different countries from the region, and across other regions as well, to bring energy modelers teams in a way to collaborate and understand, and in a way provide an opportunity for some south-to-south cooperation, and to understand what could be ways to better improve or to align our energy modeling efforts now. And just this year it was announced recently an upcoming reset network, which will be, I want to say, like a new beginning. I want to say this new 2026, where what I've heard is that there will be a slight shift in focus, now including elements of local leadership, more of a stronger element in economic focus, as well as always doing that comprehensive integration of technical evidence while supporting the policy processes and that institutional capacity. So we've been one of the newer members, but we still value a lot the experience and looking forward for those new steps that the research network will be taking. Having said that, where does that leave us with opportunities in the energy transition space? One, I think you mentioned it clearly, the need for more grid integration. In the case of Honduras, we have the CEPAC transmission infrastructure that is connecting Central America. However, there is still a lot more work to be done, especially to really amplify transmission towards 2050. For instance, Nicaragua is one of the countries with the most wind potential in the whole America. So I think that if we are able to leverage these types of resources regionally, I think that there are tremendous opportunities for the Central American region. A second point that I wanted to make just really quickly is since the Central American region has so much renewable energy potential and so much renewable energy deployment, think of Costa Rica around 98%, Honduras over 60%, and so many others. I think this can also be a space to build on the knowledge around long-duration energy storage and how we can best apply these technologies, which, even though we've learned a lot about them in other regions, they still haven't really been deployed at a massive scale where renewable energy grids would need. No? And just a final comment here on climate finance. Climate finance access is quite essential, and it is where a lot of these projects end up basically on paper and without being able to be deployed. So I think that hopefully through networks like Reset and hopefully through these other opportunities where South-to-South collaboration can happen, we can ensure that the resources will be presented and that we will have climate finance become available. Energy. Yeah, become available to countries like Honduras and others in Central America as well.
Thank you, Ricardo. If we could use all this water to generate electricity, can you imagine that? Amazing, no? Well, yes, you're right. I mean, we have amazing opportunities. We have experiences in terms of hydro. Yes, integration, Brazil, Paraguay, Argentina. Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, the Chilean with Brazil as well. So we need to do it. We need to give the right incentive and for the private sector to move on. You know, it's not only the role of the public sector. The private sector has to participate, of course, but we need the right incentives, yeah? And the possibilities are there. So going back to you, Alexa, considering the more renewable policy asks, how can state-level agencies contribute to developing sectoral roadmaps and lowering electricity costs to enable electrification across multiple sectors?
Yeah, so we're in the business of behavior change, right? So my office thinks about that and thinks about how we're approaching our stakeholders and trying to convince them to change their behaviors, essentially. And the only way that we can do that is, I mean, we move at the speed of trust. And so we take stakeholder engagement very seriously in terms of the roadmaps that we develop. We engage with our stakeholders to not only, tell them where we think the direction should be, but to understand their pain points and to understand what they're dealing with, what their needs are, so that we can hopefully identify solutions that can meet those needs. And so, as an example, we led the Drive Electric Tennessee road mapping effort for the state. And that was a multi-stakeholder initiative that brought together obviously TVA as our main generation and transmission authority, all of the local power companies within the state, the private sector, the local governments, the automotive manufacturers that manufacture electric vehicles within Tennessee, charging station operators, and so on and so forth, to all come together on a shared vision, goals, and then specific actions that we could be taking to remove market barriers to electric vehicle adoption. 5 years later, we're revisiting that roadmap. We're doing a refresh, and we're also now tacking on an additional layer focused on the medium and heavy duty segment, as well as non-road vehicles. And so we take those sorts of road mapping efforts very seriously, and our office, we think of ourselves as the dot connector, the convener, the entity that helps to catalyze projects, to make people aware of what's even out there, and then let the technology speak for itself. So.
Thank you very much for your comments. And I would like to go back to the first one about the behavior. Because in Chile, for instance, we have an issue, which is the air pollution, local air pollution problems, which becomes a co-benefit of the decarbonization process. Because if we are able to electrify central heating, public transport, we reduce air pollution. And it's been very difficult to talk to people about climate change because they don't care, they don't understand. But if you talk to them about health, about their health, that's a different story. And in fact, I want to mention a project that was done by a mining company in Chile, Anglo-American, that is located in the metropolitan city. And as part of the regulation and the commitment, in order to reduce particulate matter, they are replacing thousands of heaters in the region, okay, from wood, okay, to electric ones. And at the beginning, the company thought that it wouldn't be accepted because of cultural issues. We have, they've been using wood, for, it's raining here, not well. Wow. Yeah, hopefully we will survive. Yeah, and, but they were very well accepted because of the benefits in terms of health. So I think we need to do that change too, isn't it? Okay, I mean, obviously decarbonization is super important, but for people, we need to understand what is important for them and try to go from there, to help and push this transition process. Yeah, thanks a lot. I go back to you, Greg, with our last question. So again, as part of the More Renewable campaign, we identify 6 policy asks to accelerate electrification. I don't expect you to remember, including regulatory modernization, energy storage strategies, and regional cooperation. So, from your policy perspective, which of these areas do you see as most urgent for international climate finance institutions and businesses alliance to support? And how can we help translate these asks into action?
Thank you. Very tricky to pick one, obviously. The easy answer is they are all urgent, but I was interested to see earlier when Matthias was laying out the 6 parts of the roadmap. One of them that caught my eye was the sectoral roadmaps, and that's an area which we are interested in when it comes to implementing these NDCs that I mentioned and bringing together businesses and government to collaborate on implementation, because that really is a key part of it. Which is linked also to this regional cooperation idea, but also not just regional, I guess, but also between different sectors, so public, private, and civil society as well. One interesting example that has come up from our work with Brazil this year, for example, is that the Brazilian Council for Sustainable Development, CEBDS, who we've been working with this year, have been heavily involved in the development of these sectoral coalition groups. I think there are 6 of them in development. They were helping to lead the coordination of the first one, which is on transportation, bring together, I believe, 120 or so different groups and business groups and others involved in the sector in Brazil in order to develop a roadmap, and because they spoke to the people who are actually involved in developing these things, to make practical suggestions for how to move it forward. And I gather they've presented that to the Brazilian ministry, and it's been warmly received, and that's part of their new Plano Clima, which is the Brazilian plan for implementing the NDC. And so other examples of where models like that of bringing together business and government on a sector-by-sector basis to work through these barriers that we've been talking about to electrification, I think would be really helpful. So that one is certainly an area which I think is very interesting, and given we've just had the NDCs coming through at its conference, that's a key theme. Then the next step is going to be implementation, when everyone goes back to their respective countries after the conference with the NDCs on the table. And so yeah, that's certainly something that we'll be looking at very closely in the coming years as to what the next plans are for implementing these NDCs and how we can bring a strong business voice to push for electrification as part of that process.
Absolutely, and in fact I want to mention another alliance where we are part with Unidos por la Acción Climática, which is United for the Climate Action in Chile, where different organizations from the private sector, what we are trying to do is bring down the NDCs for the private sector, because obviously there are many goals, some which are very public sector specific, but others linked to the private sector, and help the private sector to understand them in order to participate and not only see them as obstacles, but also to look for the opportunities that imply for the businesses and for the development, sustainable development. So definitely it's something that we can keep on working in the future. I think I'm going to change seats because it's raining on top of me. So I'm changing, excuse me. Thank you. Nothing personal, Eduardo. Huh? An umbrella. Over there is raining. Okay, so Sarah, I would like to go back to you and say we've been talking about electrification that can bring benefits, but it can also introduce new costs, behavioral changes, and even impacts across communities. So what elements do you consider essential to ensure that electrification remains accessible, fair, and supportive of people's daily life as the transition accelerates?
Thank you, and I think this is a great question for us in California, and one that we're struggling with in the United States as we're in an affordability crisis, a cost of living crisis, is how to make sure our climate action and affordability measures can go hand in hand. And so our core belief is that as we electrify, we need to do so in a way that makes energy more accessible and reduces the energy burden. And so one thing that California has tackled is rate reform. Historically, we've recovered grid costs through high volumetric rates to encourage conservation. That obviously doesn't work as you try to electrify. We are trying to do the opposite of encouraging conservation. So we introduced a fixed charge on our utility bills, or we will soon be introducing a fixed charge paired with lower per kilowatt hour rates. So that it's cheaper to operate heat pumps and EVs and ensure that electrification doesn't actually raise your bills. The challenge for us in California is that wildfire mitigation, needed infrastructure upgrades, reliability investments are these fixed costs that we can't get around, but electrification gives us one tool of many to spread those fixed costs to cost more kilowatt hours. So now we're really proud that as we advance this new rate structure, we've really flipped the script on electrification to make electricity more affordable. And then the last thing is something that we're very proud of in California, our Cap and Invest program, which has invested billions of dollars back into California for climate action. Part of what that does is currently the status quo is you get 2-time rebates on your home energy bills, one in the spring, one in the fall, typically when our bills are the highest. So that Cap and Invest program has actually generated revenue that shows up in the form of credits on your home energy bill. And in this most recent extension of Cap and Invest, we're moving forward with making a more generous electric credit and a weaker gas credit to also encourage electrification. So those are a few things that we're really proud of as we get absolutely rained on over here.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's raining here inside, so hopefully we will survive. We are becoming very resilient. In Latin America, we are very resilient. So thank you for highlighting the issue of prices. Energy prices is affecting people directly, and they may, again, not understand much about what climate change means. They just need affordable energy, okay? For us in Chile, we believe that energy can create poverty, the lack of access, and obviously the barrier of the price is an important one. So Ricardo, we need to go quickly on you because I don't know how much we can sustain the conversation here. So let me ask you about, considering the more renewable policy asks, what would you be needed in Honduras to strengthen energy security and develop a national strategy for storage and smart grids? And hopefully we will survive until the end.
Yeah, I had a much longer response plan, but I think I'll keep it super short. Just to say three things. One, institutional frameworks for territorial protection. I think that's first. When engaging on any planning, I think that we must respect the rights of the people who are there. And I think when it comes to Latin America, there are so many tools like the Escazú agreement and perhaps other reforms that can be done to protect indigenous communities from being sited next to these projects that are an imperative and that I should become first in these discussions. Number two, I'm gonna go with the need for more modernized grids and smart infrastructures. Our models were showcasing that for 2050, for a decarbonized scenario, we would have to increase our transmission capacity by over 5 times of what we currently have. So I think that modernization has to happen, and it has to happen fast. And normally this modernization in transmission infrastructure, it has to come with public sources as well. So really thinking of the need of climate finance there. And finally, before the rain comes here, just to speak about electrification demand planning. Unfortunately, there are still many challenges and we haven't yet created ourselves what is going to electrification look like in our own sectors. I mean, I can already see how you're all advanced, perhaps planning on data centers, but even us, we haven't been able to integrate planning that is very much important, like electromobility and other rates that will definitely contribute, or of course, more electric homes. So I think we'll leave it there, and I leave it back to you now.
Thank you, Ricardo, and thank you everybody for being so resilient, so amazingly resilient. And I'm super glad to be able to share with you the challenges that electrification, more electrification means, and to understand that it's not only a Latin American need, but also, you know, a global need to move on into decarbonization, and also just to end, understand that decarbonization is a business opportunity as well. I mean, a decarbonized world is a world of opportunities, and a world where sustainability can grow and can flourish. So thank you very much to all of you. Thank you very much to the Climate Registry for hosting us today. And thank you very much to all of you. Sorry not to be able to open for questions, but I don't know if we will resist much longer. So thanks a lot.